Hello, this is Jason Sanders, and today I want to speak to you about vulnerable population group, homebound individuals. We want to look at some of the health concerns with this population group. First of all, define who these people are. A homebound individual is someone who gets out of the house one time or less per week. We also put in this population group semi-homebound individuals. A semi-homebound individual is someone who gets out of the house 2 or more times a week but needs extensive help to do so, and quite often has a caregiver with them helping to take care of them. The size of this population is a little bit difficult to measure. There's no solid US Census data that I could find that would really express, hey, here's how many of this vulnerable population group we have. The Center for Medicare Services does report homebound individuals. However, the homebound individuals they report are just of those that use their services. So what this means is someone could be going in for hip surgery, then they go home on skilled nursing with home health and PTOT. During that time when they're receiving services, they're considered a homebound individual. It's fairly acute in nature, and also there could be a chronic person that doesn't use any services and they wouldn't fall under that number. So we have to kind of be careful when we use the CMS numbers. I know from my experience as a case manager, we have lots of people that we would send home from skilled care nursing, and they'd go home and technically they'd be homebound for a short period of time until they could be independent again without the need for skilled nursing with home health coming in. Nationally, a couple of the articles that I found expressed that we're looking at somewhere between 2 million and 4 million people homebound in our country. That seems like a big variance between 2 million and 4 million, but let's split the difference and say 3 million. That's the population of Utah, roughly, that is made up in this vulnerable population group. So we need to make sure we're paying attention to them. They're not a small group by any means. Social determinants of health help us to see what might be some contributing factors for this population group. Economic stability with food insecurity and house instability are both large factors that come into play here. Food insecurity doesn't mean that this individual geographically is in an area where they can't get good food, but they may not be able to get to the market where the fresh fruits and vegetables are at. And so therefore, when they do go out or when people bring food in, quite often it's going to be highly processed and have a long shelf life. And their housing situation could be stable at times, but they're often on a fixed income, and they maybe are renting a place or it is a home and it needs repairs. And if expenses go up in one area, their housing might suffer because of that. Their health care and access to health care is a concern also. And we'll talk about them more as we go through this presentation. Specific concerns that contribute to the vulnerability of this population group is food, as we mentioned earlier, hygiene and safety. Are they able to take care of themselves? Are they able to transfer safely? Able to get in and out of the out of the shower and do other ADLs safely? Also, can they receive a routine primary care visits when they can't get out of the house very easily? Sometimes this is difficult. So what are the root causes? We ask the question, why are the homebound a vulnerable population group? Well, they do lack safe and viable transportation. And this can even mean something as simple as they can't get in or out of their home by themselves, or maybe even with the help of one person. Sometimes it takes 2 or more people just to get an individual down 1 or 2 stairs. And so they don't have the ability to get in and out of the home or to have the transportation to take them around to run errands, things that we would just take for granted for those of us that can easily get out and go. They can't get to the health care and receive the treatments and services they need. Or how about social events? Think about how often we go out with friends or family, sit down for a meal, and it's very therapeutic. Well, these individuals, they don't have that opportunity very often, and so that adds to some of the depression that we'll talk about in a little bit. Also, the primary care physicians quite often do not perform routine house calls. Sometimes when somebody gets really sick, they say, okay, we can come out to the home. But quite often, they're not going to make that a common thing. And so I think it's worth looking at the reimbursement models and saying, why can't this be more possible for this population group? Considering Maslow's hierarchy of needs, most of the individuals in this population group are going to have their physiological and safety needs met to some degree. Spoke earlier about some of the safety concerns, but by and large, if they have good caregivers and they're taking care of themselves, those needs should be met. Now, love and belonging, that's going to be case sensitive. Maybe they have a good family around them, a good support system. Maybe they don't. So this one could be hit and miss and is going to depend on each person. It does seem, though, that both the esteem and self-actualization levels of Maslow's hierarchy is not going to be attained by the individuals in this population group. Quite often, the esteem is low because it's hard for them to do a lot of the things that they would like to do. And self-actualization, similarly, they're just not going to get to that point. And if the esteem's not met, they can't get to that next level. Their anticipated function level is low, likely health outcomes, and we're probably going to see a progress of current chronic conditions with the possibility of secondary disease processes rising up that are related to the chronic condition that they have. They're not going to be highly susceptible to communicable diseases, but they do have a high hospitalization rate, so they could pick up hospital-acquired illnesses. Indirectly, though, even though they won't be maybe face-to-face with lots of people and out in the street or at the store with people, but poor living conditions and with a poor nutrition, they're going to have a decreased immune response. These individuals could be at risk for some diseases that wouldn't otherwise be there. Non-communicable diseases or infections, we find that homebound individuals, they're going to have an average of 4.5 chronic diseases per person. That's an awful lot. 40% of the total homebound have depression, and more than 1/3 of the homebound will have an admit to a hospital annually. And think about those numbers and how often that is putting someone in the hospital. That's very frequent. Suicide risk increases with age. In all people over 65, the suicide rate is 15.4 suicides for every 100,000. Compared to all the other age groups, it's only 12.9. Significant rise just in the fact that the population is older, not to mention being homebound. There are also significant self-care deficits among the homebound. We've talked about these earlier. There is a high risk for elder abuse among this population. Their family member, friends, or maybe a professional caregiver come into the house, but they can become susceptible to elder abuse. Remember, elder abuse has many forms. It's physical abuse, sexual, emotional, neglect, financial, and there's others as well. And these are all ways that this population group can be vulnerable, and the adult protective services may need to step in and be a part of finding a solution to those problems. Just want to mention, homebound individuals are not an inherent risk to others. This concludes our presentation. Here's a list of our resources that we've talked about today. Please feel free to let me know if you have any questions, and hope you've enjoyed this, and it's been an informative presentation on our vulnerable population group